Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Inspired Nomads series. Whether you are listening by video or by podcast, this series aspires to encourage all of you that are midlife and frustrated in a career, wanting to go full-time travel or pursue a passion, whatever that is, and you're kind of worried about what will happen to you, what will happen to your future if you change your present. So in this series, I talk to amazing guests from all over the world, from all walks of life, who have left behind something stable to go full-time travel and have all kinds of adventures in the hopes that we inspire you to follow your dreams. So today, I have with us Lisa Dorenfest. I hope I said that correctly. And Lisa, maybe you can correctly pronounce your last name for us and also tell us where you are right now. Well, by the way, I'm in Christchurch, New Zealand, I forgot to add, but tell us a little bit about you.
I am in Zihuatanejo, Mexico right now, having sailed here the long way from Isla Mujeres and all the way around the globe and up the coast of the Pacific.
Wow. So how long have you been out there sailing the seas?
This go around since February of 2013.
Let's back up. What is the stable income situation that you left behind?
Well, I left a big career in New York City where I was a financial services program manager, MD track, running, project teams of, probably 35 direct reports when I would left, working groups of 500 people, largest scale project in the firm. Great stuff. Loved it, but the sea was calling.
Yeah. Wow. So clearly making good money, working really hard, probably well set to have lots of money for retirement. So why would you chuck that all up and leave it?
Well, I had a dream to sail the world, and it basically started when I was chartering sailboats with a childhood friend of mine who'd been diagnosed with breast cancer. And we were living her bucket list, which included a lot of sailing. And in 2008, we were in Sag Harbor, and I'm like, I know what my dream is. I'm going to sail around the world. And then I was like, oh no, now I have to go do it.
Yeah. When you had that thought, oh no, I have to go do it, what kinds of fears were running through your head?
Well, I mean, from that thought and from probably the 3 years that it took me to, kind of pull the trigger the first time, I was afraid that I was going to ruin my career. Everybody would think I was crazy. My family and friends would, disown me. I'd fall flat on my face. I wouldn't be able to get off the dock. Those sorts of things came up.
How old were you when you left the first time?
So the first time, I actually took a series of sabbaticals, so to speak. But the first time that I left, I took a 3-month sabbatical to spend time with that childhood friend of mine who was dying of cancer when she was kind of going through some tough treatment. And I was 45 years old and took 3 months to spend some time with her during the decline. The second time, when I actually decided to pursue the dream of sailing around the world, it was 2011. I was 48 when I left. And I was gone for 8 months. And then the third time I was 50 and I haven't come back.
So, I mean, that's huge. So this is another great thing, what you're describing. Some people maybe want to go in steps or try it out, which is a great thing to do. So taking a sabbatical, if your company allows for it, is such a smart move. I actually tried to do that myself. Unfortunately,
Absolutely,
it didn't work. You left your job when you were 50. You, for the moment, aren't going back. How do you view career at all at this point?
And I should actually qualify that. I haven't been back, but I am going back. My plan was to circumnavigate the globe, which I've now done in November 2019, And I'm actually, with my partner, sailing the boat up to the top of Baja with plans to return to work,
Wow.
look for a job starting from April of 2020.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm
Fabulous.
coming in full circle.
Cool. So how many, so how many years in this last stint where you left and didn't go back, has it taken to sail around the world?
7 years.
Woo! Okay. So, and
Yeah.
when I mean, that's pause. Wow. That's amazing. And by the way, have you been, like, how many countries have you been to?
64. I believe on this trip, I don't know if I actually have the country count for this trip. Well, I'm going to say, let's see. So I've been to 48 by sea. So probably, I'm going to say 42 countries on this trip.
Okay. In the 7 years?
In this 7 years.
So that's beautiful. I know when I started, I thought my goal was to basically get a passport stamp in every country. And I found it so much more rewarding to stick in a country for a really long time. Obviously not, being conscious that there's rules about how long we can stay, but staying close to that allotted time because I want to really know the country and know the people. And so
Absolutely.
did you set out to see more countries, or did you set out to slow travel as you did?
So I did not set out to get stamps. There are certain places that you need to leave because your visa runs out. There are certain places that you need because you have to keep on going so that you can get to the right port that you need to be in when the hurricane season kicks in for the year. So typically there would be kind of a long-term summer and a long-term winter, depending upon which side of the equator that you are on, place that we would be. And then there would be mini destinations along the way. So, longer term destinations, to give you an example. The first year we spent 6 months in Hawaii. The second year we spent 6 months in New Zealand. The third year we spent 9 months in Australia. On the, where were we in port, to give you an example. And then, the flip side of that, where were we during the other season? We were probably a combined 9 months in French Polynesia. The next year we were probably, so that was over 2 years. And then Fiji we were at for 4 months. So it's kind of, there were places that we made bases and then other places where we kind of touch in, explore for a couple of weeks and move on because it takes a while to sail to the end goal.
How do you feel like that you have changed as a result of all of this travel?
I think that for me, it is almost a matter of I became whole. To do this adventure, I needed to give a voice to every single voice in my head. I needed to give them a name. I needed to give them a chance to articulate their position. Are we going? Are we not going? And to kind of give them each a chance to speak without judgment so that I could then get us all on the same page and say, okay, we're going to do this. Okay, great. We're all signed up and here we go. And then it was like, I was one, though. I mean, I'm not a schizophrenic, but I had, how you have like that, the voices in your head, right? And there was a lot of arguing going on, of like, just the practical side and the adventurous side and the scared little child side and all these different personalities. And really, once I kind of came to that conclusion and held that meeting and we all had our voice and we all got our chance to vote and we all got a chance to be heard, I've been marching with one voice ever since. So to me, I think that it's really becoming whole.
That's beautiful. What do you think is the significance for you going forward of having that whole you to go forward with?
Well, I think that I've always been laser focused. I was very focused on my job. I had my eye on the end goal for the job and I got the job done. But going off in this adventure, even though it was my dream, it was one part of myself's dream. And it, so I just really needed to make sure that I was aligned in myself with what was the most important thing in my life, because it is not necessarily easy to be out on the road full time. It's not easy to walk away from a big time job and to, go sail around the world. You've got to be your best support. You can't take this decision lightly, and you really need to be aligned with your goal.
Yes, I agree. What are some of the hardships that you faced? Because I don't think I've talked to anyone yet that's sailing as their travel experience. So tell us some of your adventures.
Well, again, everybody's like, oh, what's the scariest? The scariest actually probably happened when I was in Yachtmaster School before I ever joined this boat, sailing in a gale across the North Sea, with no coverage and kind of thinking like, this is it, I could die right now. And it's like, well, it's a good day to die. So that was kind of one of the ways I knew that I really liked sailing. Probably the scariest since I've been on a mandala with the captain was when we were sailing from the Gambier to the Marquesas. We knowingly went out into bad weather to rush to meet friends. We were sailing in 55 knot winds, 6-meter seas for 4 days. It was pretty hellacious. On the 5th day, the wind subsided. We opened the head sail. It fell into the ocean. We almost lost it. We were able to pull it back in, etc. And since then, we've said we're not rushing for any friends. We're not going to die because our friends want to meet us somewhere.
Yeah. Good call. Wow.
Exactly. Yeah. And then, I guess if I had to say, best experience, and you don't really need a sailboat to do this, but our sailboats got us there, was snorkeling with whales in Tonga. In fact, you're pretty close to Tonga. I'd highly recommend this. It was awesome.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I was going to ask you for some recommendations. So, and I know that, there's the hardships of the boat. There's the hardships of confronting yourself. I've had to do that in my own journey, but are you, so you've always been on the boat with someone, right? You're not, or are you sailing by yourself?
I am not a solo sailor. I'm currently sailing with my now partner, who I actually met because we had a shared love of sailing. We met when I was still working in New York. He had been sailing in the Caribbean for 5 years. And he came up for a summer, and I had a dream of going to the Pacific, but I was like, oh, no, not yet, maybe 5 or 10 years from now. And, so we separated for a time. And when I was ready to go, he reached out to me again. Kind of a long story. Both of us had cancer at the same time. And at the conclusion of our treatments, he reached out to me again and he said, hey, I'm thinking about going to the Bahamas. You want to come with me? And I was like, I'm going to sail around the world. And I'm like, if you'll take me to New Zealand, if you'll take me across the Pacific, I'll go with you. And he said, okay. Here we are all the way around.
That's amazing. That's cool.
Yeah.
Talking, and I'm glad that you're better. So, talking logistically, how have you been able to afford 7 years of sailing around the world?
So I basically gave away everything that I owned. I sold my apartment, so I owned an apartment. I had been good at saving money. So, not just putting stuff away in the 401k, but also putting a little bit away, paycheck to paycheck, just in regular savings. And I had some deferred compensation as well that supported it.
And you mentioned that when your intention is to go back to, you're going to Baja and then I guess back to the States. And then are you looking for work, or you have work lined up already?
I am looking for work. So this go around, the first time I had a paid sabbatical. The second time I actually resigned my position to start my adventure sailing around the world, and was offered a leave of absence. And my Yachtmaster program in crossing the Atlantic Ocean, I went back to work for a year. and delivered the biggest program of my career. It was absolutely fantastic. But the health scare that I had, that I recovered from, basically said, it's now. You got to go now.
Yeah.
You don't
Yeah.
want to wait. So here I am. But I've been fine. I mean, I've been cancer free for 8 years, and you know, and yeah, now I'm just planning on going back to New York. I've got a pretty good reputation in the market. I think that one of my secrets to success is that I was very good at managing to my peers and managing downward. Uh, I mean, I managed well upward because I did a good job and I always delivered. So the people that I worked for loved me, but I was always conscious of trying to be, you know, to work well with people, and to also groom my team and to support them. And, you know, those people are now the people that are in charge and running things. So,
Ah, okay, great. Yeah. Good
yeah.
lesson. You know, we're always told not to burn bridges, but you know, it's not just burning bridges, it's have great relationships with all the people around you that maybe someday
Yeah.
you want to work with again. Yeah.
Absolutely. And, you know, I've been blessed to work with really, really great people. And I hope to have the opportunity to work with them again.
So, thinking about the return to your work, I think about there's a woman I interviewed on this podcast series who at 63, you know, she had stepped away from work, came back, and was looking for work and passionate. She's a passionate woman, found a great job at 63, which I think is amazing. I know another woman who left at about 48, and now at about 50, she's found a dream job. I'm going to be profiling her in a blog post. So far, I'm seeing that this gap at an older age isn't leading to ruining a career. It's actually so far leading to recreating career, and a career that's so much more fulfilling. So thinking about all that long-winded statement, I'm just curious, as you think about your upcoming job search, what are your thoughts and feelings about it?
Well, I definitely am in the camp of it's all going to work out. Surprisingly, I actually got offered 2 jobs while I was along my way,
Wow.
and opted for one in Australia and one in Singapore, and opted for a variety of reasons to continue onward while I had the chance again. And so that made me feel these were in markets where I didn't really have any relationships, and I networked my way through to positions that, you know, resulted in job offers. So that gives me a great deal of confidence. And just also, I have found, you know, again, when I left my job and I thought that I was going to fall flat on my face, I came back, you know, got this huge project when I came back, and know that I'm up for the challenge again. And I think that, you know, interestingly, work is my comfort zone. Even after this past 7 years at sea, this is not my natural state. This is like, you know, I always have to think every time we kind of, you know, leave land again or leave a passage again to go back to sea, I always have to think about it. Sometimes it's like I'm just on the boat for the first time. But when I've been talking to a few friends lately about jobs and the job market and what might be out there for you, blah, 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 I suddenly find that I'm immediately back into it. I feel like it's like I never left. And I feel like I'm having these conversations as if I was talking to them 5 minutes ago. That's my natural comfort zone. So I really don't have a concern about my ability to be able to re-enter it. And, you know, I think that people are starting to work to much later ages. And I think that the fact that I've gone out and pursued grand adventures is going to be an asset for me, not a detraction.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I love what you just said, because one of the reasons I find people should jump ship is because we are working longer in life. I mean, I think the retirement age is going to just get pushed out later and later, and life circumstances are what they are. And since you are going to work longer and later, why not build some fun time in there somewhere?
So to that point, you know, my second sabbatical was, you know, the leave of absence. I took 8 months and went off to Yachtmaster School across the Atlantic, and I went back to work. And I felt that I was so much more clear and so much more capable than I was when I was left. It was like I was cleansed and was able to deliver much more easily
Yeah.
without all the angst, so there's actually a real value to taking some time out and just getting whole and focusing on yourself, and you come back and it's a lot easier than it was when you left. It's like, taking a good long weekend.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I'm sorry, this funny question just popped in my head. As I'm thinking about you across the table from the person interviewing you, and I'm wondering, how do you explain the big career gap? Like, how do you answer the question? Like, oh, you were not working for 7 years. Like, what do you say to that?
Oh, I say exactly what I've been doing, that it was a dream to sail around the globe that took me from the office to the sea. And during that time, I have become a visual storyteller. I've become a content creator, and I've achieved my goals and widened my horizons. And I guess that here's another way I would put this. This is not all unicorns and rainbows out here on a sailboat. It takes a lot of planning and courage and focus to get yourself and around the globe without a boat. And at the time that I even had this dream and I jumped, I actually resigned my position before I decided to go sailing with Fabio. I jumped at that. And so it takes a lot of guts and planning and fortitude. And, I learned that on the job, and I bring back what I've been building upon that for the past 7 years.
Beautiful. Yeah. That's been my experience too, is that, from the outside, it may look like, oh, wow, lucky you, you're just traipsing around the world. And sure, there is an element that, yeah, lucky us, right? We get to travel around the world. But there's also in your case, the logistical, navigational, you don't know, life or death situations and so forth. And with me, with like my bags and, but in addition, so I think all of us end up also picking up some sort of really neat skill set. Like, I've developed a blog that's gone from simple, relaying my experience to something much bigger that's content management, as you said, content development, and, video series creation, things like that. So we're all actually doing all these other things. And that's the point. It's not like we're doing nothing. We're actually doing so much that's great for the resume that I wouldn't have thought of. So great point.
Absolutely.
Another question, just because of the times we're in, I'm curious. First off, when you park, so to speak, somewhere, do you live off your boat, or do you stay in bed and breakfast, hotels? Like, what's your accommodation like?
It's a little bit of a mix of both. Sometimes we will live on the boat. Like when we were in Hawaii, it was fabulous. We lived in a marina paying $700 a month, which is effectively like, the price of a couple nights at a room in a hotel. And we lived next to Waikiki Beach for 4 months on our boat. That was awesome. Everybody loved coming to visit us in Hawaii. When we were in New Zealand, we lived a bit on our boat because we were like in the Bay of Islands, Opua, doing some sailing there. And then we bought a Honda Odyssey and did kind of a whole South Island circumnavigation in a Honda Odyssey. You probably are well aware that it's easy to purchase a vehicle and sell a vehicle pretty easily in New Zealand. And then while we were there, my partner ended up, his cancer metastasized in his liver. And so we ended up living in a hotel for a little bit of time, well, in the hospital in his case, and in a hotel for a little bit of time. He had surgery. He had a 33 by 33 by 10 centimeter metastatic tumor removed off of his liver, and I don't know, centimeter, millimeter, whatever. And 45 days later, we sailed to Fiji. But but anyhow, so we are a mix of, we were a mix of traveling inland. If we do a road trip, we'll stay in hotels and B&Bs, and if we are living in a port, we'll stay in the boat, maybe in a marina. It's a mix.
Yeah. So part of the reason I ask, I'm just curious, again, because of the times, how are you responding to the coronavirus threat?
Well, I've been thinking a lot about that. Right now, we actually feel relatively safe because we're theoretically traveling in our own home. And lucky for us, we had done most of our sailing up the coast. We left Panama in December and did our sailing up the coast through Costa Rica, Nicaragua, and then into Mexico in the January timeframe. So we got here with a 180-day visa before it broke out. Um, we're living in our sailboat. Zihuatanejo does not have this feeling of like, it's a crisis, it's a crisis. I'm here. It just seems like, it's just another day. But, most of the tourists that are here are either expats that, live here as snowbirds, or the 45 sailboats that are in the anchorage for Guitar Fest right now. So all the boats come down in Mexico to this anchorage for Guitar Fest. And so I don't really feel uncomfortable at all. I am I do keep in touch with lots of sailors, and I'd be glad to share with you a link from a site that we all use called Noon Site. That basically is kind of something that allows us to, navigate our way around the world. And they've got a listing of what is the response in ports right now to the coronavirus. Because, some people, nobody's been denied entry, but people are now, getting their temperature taken and having to stay in quarantine for a couple of weeks. And, so stuff is starting to happen.
Yeah.
That said, I think that I feel about it this way. If you're somebody that's got a week, I would probably say don't travel right at this moment, because who knows how this thing is going to unfold. And not because I'm afraid that something awful is going to happen to you, because awful can happen anywhere, but more that you might have difficulty getting somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
If you're on the road right now, I'd keep on the road and I'd keep doing what you're doing. So I guess that whatever it is that you're doing, keep doing it. There are people that are starting, their circumnavigation. They're going from port to port to port. And I think you just have to live your life.
Yeah.
And, whatever's meant to be. I'm really kind of one of those things. If it's meant to be, it's meant to be. But if I was sitting at home right now, it's like, oh, I want to take a week's vacation and I've got to be at my desk in a week, I probably wouldn't go, because, I don't want to be in Asia and all of a sudden I can't get on a plane and, be back in New York for work at 8:00 in the morning.
Right.
I understand and appreciate that risk.
Yeah. Yeah. So thinking about anyone that's watching or listening to this episode and wants to, is thinking about, maybe I should leave, but I'm a little afraid. Like, what advice would you offer them? Meaning, sorry.
Well, one of the things that
leaving their career. Sorry, I don't mean about coronavirus. I meant about leaving their career.
How to take that leap during the virus. No.
Yeah.
So we touched on the first thing that I would say, which is baby steps. I think that it's a great idea to take small breaks first. If your company offers sabbaticals, paid or even unpaid, if your company offers leaves of absence, do you have something that you can come back to? I think that would be the first advice that I would give to somebody. I think that the second piece of advice I would say is you want to run to something, not from something. This just can't be like, I had a really bad day at the office, I'm going to go sailing. It's got to be, this is a lifetime change story for me. This is an adventure that I have to go on, that I'm compelled to go on, that I need to be here. And for me, I think that, again, the running to something is going to get you through the tough times. It's going to be following your own North Star, and it's going to get you to where you're going. And I think that another thing that I would say is, nothing is permanent. There's always going to be other jobs. And I would also say this to people that are thinking about going back to, to work for a period of time. There's always going to be other adventures, and adventures are wherever you find it. When the time is right, it's right. When I left my role, it was because I felt that I had choice, but I felt like I didn't have choice. Like I was just compelled, and I had to go fulfill this dream. And if you don't feel really, really strongly about it, I don't know if I'd advise it, a big leap. a sabbatical leave, sure, check it out. I mean, no problem. 3 months, go for it, but 7 years, one step at a time.
Yeah. Well, interestingly, myself and many of the people I've spoken to that have been on the road for a period of years didn't actually intend it to be for years. We kind of started thinking, I certainly thought this was going to be 3 or 6 months, and then back to reality, and oops.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So is any last comment or thought that you want to share with the listening audience?
Yeah, and it gets back to, how did I afford to do this trip? And I forgot to touch on this when we were going through it before. But in the sailing life, and maybe you find this on the road as well, it costs 10% of what I was spending to live the New York dream. So I'm really not spending at the level that I was in New York. I don't have an apartment. Our boat is our home. I'm not buying, bunches of clothes to, have a whole wardrobe for work, and because that's the thing to do, and because I really love cashmere. I have sailing outfits that I brought with me 7 years ago, and I'm still wearing them, and they're looking a little worn for weather.
Yeah.
So I'm spending my money differently. I'm, and again, on the road, it's a lot less expensive for me, the way that I've positioned it. We're on our boat, we live, we eat dinner on a home, and we're going to places where the cost of living is a fraction of what I was doing before.
Yeah. I have the exact same experience. I mean, also coming from life in New York, traveling the world is dramatically cheaper than maintaining an expensive apartment and day-to-day life in New York. So totally agree. Lisa, if somebody listening is just really
Totally
by your story and wants to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Best place to start is on my blog, lisadorenfest.com. One Ocean at a Time is the name, and it's at lisadorenfest.com.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, thank you for being here today. This has been, like I said, you're the first person I've spoken to that's got life at sea. So very cool. I think your story is super inspirational, and I'm hoping that people listening today will just make one more step towards their own goal of traveling, or however it is that they want to see their life evolve and change. So for those of you listening, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Inspired Nomads. Hopefully you got tons of inspiration. If you want to contact me, ask me questions, send any feedback, you can do that at heather@heathermarkel.com. And if you're listening and think that you should be a guest on this show, and you would like to share your inspirational story with other people about leaving stability behind after 40 to go and pursue your dream of traveling the world, you can fill out a questionnaire at www.interviewquestionnaire.com. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much.